July 11th, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. In the shattered hedgerows of northern France, Oberstleutnant Friedrich Weber of the German Panzer Lehr Division peered through his field glasses at a column of American tanks advancing along a country lane. His engineers had assured him the Americans built toys, machines unfit for real war. The Sherman tank, they said, was nothing but a rolling coffin, thin armor, a weak gun, a box on tracks. Weber had believed them, but what he saw that afternoon shook his confidence. The Shermans just kept coming. Knock out one, three more rolled forward. Burn a dozen, 100 more appeared by dusk. It was not the quality of the American tank that terrified him. It was the endless quantity. When the M4 Sherman entered production in 1942, German intelligence laughed. Compared to the Panzer IV, the Tiger, or the Panther, the Sherman looked unimpressive. Its 75mm gun could not penetrate heavy German armor from the front. Its armor, only 50mm thick on early models, was vulnerable to nearly every German anti-tank weapon. German officers mocked it as Tommy Cooker or Ronson, after the lighter that always lit on the first strike. To German engineers obsessed with perfection and heavy firepower, the Sherman seemed amateurish. But what they failed to understand was that America did not design a tank to win duels. They designed a tank to win a war. The numbers tell the story. Between 1942 and 1945, American factories built nearly 50,000 Shermans, more tanks than Germany produced of all types combined. The Ford Motor Company's Highland Park plant, Chrysler's Detroit Arsenal, and scores of other factories turned out Shermans like automobiles. Assembly lines hummed day and night. One tank rolled off the line every 30 minutes. In contrast, the complex German Panther required 150,000 man-hours to build, and the Tiger even more. Shermans were simple, reliable, and fast to produce. German officers who captured factories in France were astonished to discover Shermans arriving in crates, shipped overseas, reassembled in ports, and driven straight into battle. One lesser-known fact: the Sherman was designed with extraordinary logistical foresight. Its engine, whether the Ford V8, the Continental Radial, or even the Chrysler Multibank, could run on standard gasoline. Spare parts were interchangeable across models. Tracks, wheels, and transmissions were standardized. A Sherman crew disabled in Normandy could strip parts from a wreck and repair their tank in hours. German crews, by contrast, struggled to keep their Panthers and Tigers running. Transmissions broke, engines overheated, parts were scarce. One German report admitted, "We lose more tanks to mechanical failure than to enemy fire." The Sherman, mocked as a coffin, proved to be a workhorse. In battle, its limitations were real. At Kasserine Pass in 1943, Shermans were outgunned by long-barreled Panzer IVs. In Normandy, they fell prey to Panthers and Tigers. But the Americans adapted. Shermans operated in units of 5 against 1, supported by artillery and air power. They did not duel Panthers, they overwhelmed them. A Tiger might kill 3 Shermans in a fight, but while the Tiger burned through its limited ammunition, more Shermans rolled forward. German engineers had built perfection. America had built inevitability. Another lesser-known fact: the Sherman's 75mm gun, though weak against armor, was superb for infantry support. It fired high-explosive rounds more effective than the German 75mm L-70. In Bocage country, where infantry faced machine gun nests and fortified farmhouses, the Sherman's gun was devastating. American commanders valued this versatility. A Sherman could kill a bunker, support infantry, and in numbers, even overwhelm enemy tanks. German infantry, who had been told the Sherman was useless, learned the hard way that its shells tore through stone walls like paper. Then came the upgrades. In 1944, the M4A3E8 Easy 8 appeared, mounting a 76mm high-velocity gun and improved suspension. Against Panthers, it still struggled frontally, but from the side it was deadly. In the Pacific, Shermans were fitted with flamethrowers, reducing bunkers and caves to ash. The British introduced the Sherman Firefly, armed with a legendary 17-pounder gun. In Normandy, Fireflies destroyed Tigers and Panthers at long range, shocking German tank crews who had once considered themselves invincible. At Villers-Bocage, a single Firefly knocked out 3 Tigers in minutes. German engineers who had mocked the Sherman were stunned to learn it could carry a gun superior to their own designs. Psychology mattered as much as steel. German tank crews trained in elite schools took pride in their machines. They expected superiority. But in Normandy, they faced wave after wave of Shermans, backed by artillery and fighter bombers. Even if a Tiger destroyed 10, the 11th might kill it. One German officer later admitted, "It was not their tanks we feared, it was their numbers. The more we killed, the more they came." The logistics behind this avalanche were astonishing. Each American division in Europe fielded hundreds of Shermans, supported by thousands of supply trucks carrying spare parts, ammunition, and fuel. Repair units operated with assembly line efficiency. A knocked-out Sherman, if not burned, was often repaired and returned to battle within days. German tank losses were permanent. Factories bombed by Allied air raids could not replace them fast enough. By late 1944, American production outpaced German by nearly 10 to 1. One little-known statistic, during the Battle of the Bulge, the Americans deployed nearly 4,000 Shermans. The Germans fielded fewer than 500 Panthers and Tigers. The Germans inflicted heavy losses, but the weight of numbers told. When fuel shortages crippled the German advance, Shermans counterattacked relentlessly. By January 1945, the Ardennes was littered with burned tanks, mostly Shermans, but also Panthers and Tigers abandoned for lack of fuel. The Germans had built masterpieces they could not sustain. The Americans had built thousands of coffins that rolled on. German engineers were not blind to the truth. Reports to Berlin warned that American tank production was overwhelming. One engineer confessed, "We build works of art. They build tools. In war, tools win." Yet Nazi ideology blinded leadership. Hitler demanded ever heavier tanks, like the 70-ton Tiger II, which broke bridges and consumed fuel Germany did not have. Meanwhile, American commanders, understanding the value of mobility and reliability, kept building Shermans by the tens of thousands. The shock to German soldiers was personal. Prisoners captured in Normandy expressed disbelief at how many Shermans they faced. "We thought you had 50, one told his interrogator. "You have 5,000. Another, a Panther crewman, admitted, "Our tank was superior, but what use is superiority when they surround you?" Even on the Eastern Front, where Germany faced the Soviet T-34, reports trickled back of American Lend-Lease Shermans fighting in Russian service. Nearly 4,000 were sent to the USSR. Russian crews praised their radios and reliability, features German tanks often lacked. German officers, hearing that their enemies on two fronts drove the same machine, shook their heads. The Sherman was everywhere. By 1945, the verdict was clear. Germany had lost the tank war not because its machines were weak, but because its industry could not match America's flood. When American tanks rolled into the heart of Germany, they came not in dozens, but in thousands. Shermans crossed the Rhine, climbed the Alps, and lined the streets of Berlin. For German engineers who had once laughed, the joke was bitter. They had built marvels that could not change the outcome. After the war, many German officers admitted their miscalculation. Heinz Guderian, father of the Panzer Arm, remarked, "Quantity has a quality all its own. We learned too late." Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, testified at Nuremberg that Germany had no answer to America's industrial scale. "The Sherman was not the best tank," he said, "but it was the most produced. That is what mattered." The Sherman, mocked as a death trap, became a symbol of inevitability. It fought on every front, in every theater, in every army of the Allies. It outlasted the war, serving in dozens of countries for decades after 1945. To the men who built it, it was never art. It was utility. To the Germans who faced it, it became a nightmare of repetition. Kill one, another appeared. Burn 10, 100 replaced them. In the end, German engineers who laughed at the Sherman learned the harshest truth of war. Perfection means little when the enemy has more of everything. More tanks, more fuel, more factories, more men. Against that tide, even the strongest armor cracked. And so, the Sherman rolled forward, not as the best tank of the war, but as the one that never stopped coming.